So the idea of immigration, you know, they walked up the street. Let's just say that instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I definitely want to touch on that further. But first, I wanted to go back to something that you asked, which is what is happening right now with immigration policy.
Right.
So one thing that I want to mention for right off the bat is that President Obama promised that he would pass immigration reform within his first year in office. So on the day after his inauguration, on January 21st of last year, Pueblo Action Fund, along with many other organizations all over the country, launched a campaign called the Reform Immigration for America campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And we had actions with a lot of people all over the country to remind the president to make this a priority. So since then, last year was a very difficult year for the president and for the Democrats, and they had a lot of setbacks. And one of the biggest, if not the biggest one, was that their top priority, which was healthcare reform, stalled, and they were hoping to pass it by August, and it still hasn't been passed. So, excuse me. So that is something that I think has affected immigration. It hasn't come up yet, but well, at least the president hasn't. Well, you know, immigration has not come to the forefront yet, but there has been some movement recently. But basically, the Reform Immigration for America campaign at the beginning of this year started to remind the president, and had more actions to say say, well, you know,
these are your
we
promises.
had a promise that this would happen the first year, and
so they're holding him accountable to these promises.
Yes, because we have a very strong grassroots network of people, like I said, all over the country, because immigrants are part of communities all over the U.S. And people are not going to just let this go away.
Right.
But we also are putting pressure on elected officials, and we have a lot of allies in Congress. Our local representative, Lois Capps, has been a strong supporter of immigration reform for several years.
Well, that's great, because that was one thing I was going to ask you, is what's happening locally.
Yeah, well, locally, well, first, so I just wanted to finish off.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
What's happening. So there's been a bill introduced in the House of Representatives by Luis Gutierrez from Illinois, and it's a pretty good bill. It's one of the better ones, and it would allow a path for legalization for people who have been here. So essentially, you know, this is a really controversial, loaded term, but something like amnesty, which was something that happened in the 80s, and which really just means that people who have been here for a while have the opportunity to get legal status, which right now they don't. Right now, people are being forced to live in
in really below poverty situations.
Right.
You know, I mean, with the state of the economy as it is for documented workers, I can, you know, and it's hard enough to get resources. There's no jobs out there, and get resources to help as far as maintaining a living. But I can imagine for an immigrant family who's undocumented, what kind of resources would they have?
Well, it's hitting the recession is definitely hitting undocumented immigrants particularly hard, because right now, as you know, a lot of employers are getting rid of jobs, and we're seeing a lot of layoffs in different companies, and so workers in general are having a hard time finding jobs. You know, California has one of the highest unemployment rates in the country, and for undocumented workers, it's particularly difficult because of the social security status.
Right.
So a lot of people are struggling. This means that people are particularly vulnerable. But you know, this is something that also affects entire communities, because local businesses, which, you know, are patronized by immigrants, and schools where people who are immigrants have their children, all of them are being affected by, you know, people being in this state of uncertainty and of upheaval.
Right.
So immigration reform really is about allowing people to participate fully in society, to come out of the shadows, and to be able to be integrated. Because right now we have this division between people who are our neighbors and you know, who go to school with our kids, but they're at risk any time of, you know, being taken away.
Yes. And can you comment on the you know, some of the immigration stereotypes and myths, as far as you know, people who've come here, and you know, there's a huge myth about, you know, they're all on welfare, and you know, they're receiving all of these governmental assistance, when really that's not true, because they don't have access to most of this.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up a really good point. A lot of, and you know, I think that this is important to discuss, because I think that a lot of people out there are not really afraid of immigrants per se, but they just they feel like something is being taken away from them. You know, like, why is this person getting a job when I don't have a job? Or, you know, why is the quality of my child's education, you know, being compromised? But really, something that we have to be clear about is that immigrants, even undocumented immigrants, are a part of our community, just like everybody else, and contribute. They pay taxes. A lot of times they pay taxes that they won't even be benefiting from, because they pay Social Security taxes using numbers that aren't theirs.
Where they will never get that money back.
Right. So that money just goes to benefit everybody else. Not only that, but there are states where the you know, the population, the non-immigrant population is aging, so that if it weren't for the immigrants who are actually stimulating the economy and working and paying those taxes, they would be losing the revenue base for their services. And also immigrants, it's been proven, you know, the numbers don't lie. This is an immigrant rights issue, but this is also a matter of common sense. It's been shown that immigrants don't want to use services. A lot of services people can't even qualify for if they don't have at least permanent residency.
Right. Yeah. As well as fear to try to access services, because they are afraid if they come forward that will trigger either like an immigration raid type thing.
And sometimes it does, actually, because sometimes, you know, during the 90s, a lot of welfare policies and immigration policies were changed so that if you received any type of government assistance, it actually would be harder for you to immigrate, or, you know, there's that idea that people have. So yeah, people, and there's a stigma, and people don't want to be seen, precisely because there is that idea out there. People don't want to be seen as receiving any type of government assistance. But also, another thing is that immigrants are contributing to the economy with their work. And work is something that's really undervalued in this society. You know, there's been a downward pressure on work, and, you know, the quality of work, and the wages. And this is something that's not immigrants' fault, but over the past 30 years in this country, wages have increased very little, while the cost of living, housing, healthcare
Right.
you name it, has gone up. So
Exactly.
a lot of times immigrants are also scapegoated for some of these things.